Look closely at the dazzling edifice of modern existence. Does not the relentless, artificial brilliance of its thousand screens, those ubiquitous panes of simulated reality, cast a shadow colder and more profound than any natural night? We inhabit an age that proclaims freedom from all visible shackles. Yet never before has the human soul been so diligently, so willingly interred. I speak to you tonight not from the physical tomb, but from the spiritual sepulchre that many of you call home. You, the denizens of this luminous modernity, march through your days convinced of your autonomy, intoxicated by the ephemeral nectar of instant gratification. But I, who have charted the abyssal depths of the human heart, perceive a more terrifying geometry at play, the architecture of the new bondage. Consider, if you will, the profound paradox. We have conquered distance, yet we are strangers to ourselves. We possess the accumulated knowledge of the ages at the mere twitch of a finger, yet we suffer an epidemic of intellectual ennui, a profound, paralyzing boredom that gnaws at the roots of comprehension. This is the specter of the modern soul, restless, distracted, and above all, owned. The chains are invisible, woven not of iron, but of relentless, trivial engagement. The true genius of this new slavery lies in its seductive subtlety. It does not confine the body. It merely paralyzes the will. It does not demand labor in the fields, but ceaseless, frantic activity within the self-constructed cage of perpetual connectivity. We have been conditioned to fear silence, to dread the sublime, unsettling mirror of solitude. For in that silence, in that mirror, we might glimpse the pallid features of the master we serve, the inertia of the external. We are told that progress is measured by the speed at which we can discard contemplation. Thought, the deepest and most perilous activity of man, has been rebranded as inefficiency. We exchange the weight of genuine reflection, the magnificent, terrifying darkness necessary for the growth of the soul, for the weightlessness of constant, immediate feedback. This exchange is not freedom. It is a meticulously orchestrated psychic erosion. This video is not a soothing balm for the anxious spirit. It is an autopsy of the self, a grim dissection of the means by which the modern individual, believing they grasp the reins of their destiny, has merely leased their innermost sanctum to a chorus of unseen, digital phantoms. We shall descend into this melee, examining how the very tools designed for our liberation have become the instruments of our sophisticated confinement. Tonight, we ask the most crucial and perhaps most terrifying question. If the new chains are invisible, how do you know you are still bound? And if the primary function of your life is not living, but reacting, are you truly the architect of your existence, or merely the ghost haunting the elaborate ruin of your own potential? The air is thin here, friends. Prepare yourselves. We must now delve into the precise mechanisms that sustain the sepulchre of self. The descent is always the most revealing portion of any journey, for it is only when the light above begins to dim that the true contours of the abyss become visible. We spoke of invisible chains. Now, we must examine the alloy from which they are forged. This is the maelstrom of the immediate, a psychic vortex designed to consume the most precious and least renewable resource of the soul: dedicated attention. The modern mind is perpetually in a state of suspended animation, a half-life where perception is constant but comprehension is we are barraged by a ceaseless, shimmering cascade of stimuli, a digital phantasmagoria, designed not to inform, but to prevent the dangerous act of dwelling. For true reflection demands time, demands silence, demands the courage to sit alone with the unfiltered echo of one's own consciousness. This era has taught us that silence is a vacuum, and vacuums, we are instinctively taught, must be instantly filled. The engine of this new slavery is the insidious manipulation of desire. It operates on a principle far more subtle than crude command. It operates by fabricating a perpetual state of lack. Observe the mechanisms of the celebrated feed. It is an unending ribbon of possibility, a gallery of simulated perfection, a relentless testament to everything you are not and everything you could possess. This generates an internal tension, a phantom ache for the unattainable, which ensures that the present moment, the very ground upon which authentic life is built, is perpetually deemed insufficient. We are forced into the role of the spectral voyeur, observing life rather than participating in its gritty, magnificent reality. The self, once a fortress of unique internal experience, is reduced to a frantic curator of external value. The profound hunger for significance, that noble human impulse to leave a trace in the temporal sands, is hijacked and transmuted into a trivial craving for numerical affirmation, the like, the share, the fleeting digital applause. These are merely narcotic substitutes for genuine offering a momentary, chemical spike of euphoria followed immediately by a deeper crash into dependency. This environment fosters a new breed of anxiety, the terror of the unexamined life. If you are constantly documenting, curating, and broadcasting your experience, you are never truly having the experience. The moment is sacrificed at the altar of its own future representation. We wear masks of manufactured cheerfulness, not for the benefit of others, but to satisfy the spectral audience we carry perpetually in our pockets. The terror sets in when the device is set aside, when the connectivity falters, and the individual is confronted with the uncomfortable truth that the meticulously constructed external persona may be all that remains, and that the interior life has withered into a sterile, echoing canyon. Furthermore, this obsession with the immediate and the external blinds us to the cyclical nature of true human joy and sorrow. We mistake the rapid succession of minor excitements for the profound depth of genuine emotion. Life, in its true glory, demands peaks and valleys, periods of intense suffering that lend gravity and meaning to moments of transcendence. But the modern sphere attempts to flatten this experience, promising a continuous, manageable stream of mild engagement. This is the psychological equivalent of draining the ocean. To prevent storms, we lose the vast, terrifying beauty of the depths in exchange for the predictable monotony of a shallow pool. The very concept of free time has been annexed. It is no longer a space for replenishment, contemplation, or the cultivation of inner gardens. It is merely unscheduled time to be dedicated to the consumption of external media. We have become the perfect consumers, not just of material goods, but of attention itself, a commodity that is perpetually scarce, because we are perpetually giving it away. And in this giving, we surrender the control of our internal landscape, allowing the whims of algorithms and the calculated cruelty of external desires to dictate the rhythm and purpose of our existence. We must now turn our scrutiny inward, examining the very mechanism by which this system demands our allegiance, ensuring our silence is never truly our own. The steady, rhythmic pulse of the external world, the gentle, insistent chime that beckons us back to the digital parlor, is not merely a distraction. It is the calculated drumming of a heart designed to beat louder than our own. This, my friends, is the sound of the telltale heart of the modern age. A relentless, suffocating rhythm that proves the life within has been usurped by an external mechanism. We have arrived at the chilling core of the matter, the deliberate substitution of meaning with metrics. Human life, in its terrifying splendor, is inherently qualitative, nuanced, steeped in the ambiguity of intention and the poetry of the soul. But the architecture of the new digital dominion demands quantification. Every thought, every preference, every moment of perceived joy or fleeting sorrow must be translated into a data point, an entry in the ledger of automated consumption. We are no longer individuals possessing unique internal worlds. We are demographic segments, predictive models, nodes in a vast network whose only true function is predictable reaction. Observe the subtle, yet brutal, coercion that underpins this system. If your worth is defined by your engagement, then your silencio period of internal gestation and growth becomes an act of intellectual and social suicide. The pressure is immense, produce or perish. You must constantly generate content, constantly react to the content of others, constantly prove that you are present, even if your presence is a mere ghost in the machine. This is the exhaustion of performance, the fatigue of the actor who was never permitted to leave the stage, even when the audience is comprised solely of shadows and statistics. And here, in the cold, analytic center of this observation, I feel compelled to pause, much as one pauses on a desolate moor to reorient oneself by the fitful light of a dying moon. If these words, heavy with the dust of existential dread and the chill of profound recognition, resonate within the spectral corridors of your own experience, if you recognize the pattern of the chains, even as you wear them, then I implore you, lend weight to this discourse. If you find yourself caught, as I am, in the intricate, mesmerizing horror of this realization, pause your endless scroll, abandon the momentary impulse toward distraction, and signal your participation. Subscribe, if you will, to this ongoing dissection, this shared vigil over the fading light of true selfhood, and grant this message the necessary resonance to disturb the sleep of others. Let your affirmation be a tremor beneath the digital floorboards. For those who choose to remain, let us proceed into the darker implications. This relentless quantification dismantles empathy. When all experience is processed as data, the inherent, messy complexity of another human being, their inexplicable suffering, Their illogical joy is reduced to a flaw in the model. We lose the capacity for tragic understanding, replacing it with the sterile arrogance of judgment based on metrics. The algorithms, our modern arbiters of truth, are incapable of poetry, incapable of sorrow, and thus, we who rely upon them risk becoming equally sterile, equally blind to the magnificent, terrifying anarchy of the human condition. We are becoming efficient, but efficiency is the enemy of the soul. It is time now to examine the grand illusion that makes this entire mechanism appear not as a prison, but as a boundless horizon. The illusion, vast and encompassing, is the belief in omniscience through proximity. We are convinced that, because we are perpetually connected to the global current of information, we are, therefore, knowledgeable. This is perhaps the cruelest facet of the new enslavement, the substitution of genuine intellectual depth with the shallow pretense of breadth. We mistake the surface ripple for the oceanic tide. Consider the nature of true knowledge, the slow, laborious accumulation of insights, the painful wrestling with complex truths that often resists immediate categorization. It is a process requiring sustained solitude and focused energy. The modern sphere, however, offers a seductive alternative. The instant digest, the summarized argument, the readily consumable fact, divorced from its context, its doubt, and its intellectual lineage. This creates the knowledge phantom, the sensation of knowing without the intellectual infrastructure to support it. We become fluent in headlines, but illiterate in substance. This fragmentation of information is a direct attack on critical thought. The greatest danger is not the lie, but the inability to discern truth from noise. When the mind is conditioned to leap frantically from one stimulus to the next, the capacity for linear, profound analysis veriact, that separates contemplation from mere reaction. We are given the impression of infinite choice, yet our intellectual pathways are meticulously curated by algorithms designed only for maximum engagement, not for enlightenment. This is the enigma of the echo chamber. The individual, believing they are exploring a boundless world, is in fact trapped within a beautifully polished mirror reflecting only their own predispositions and fears. What happens, then, to descend to genuine originality, when the very mechanism of communication favors the easily digestible, the instantly validated, and the widely accepted? True genius, often born of intense isolation and a refusal to conform to current intellectual fashions, struggles to breathe in this hyper-connected, yet intensely conformist environment. The requirement to constantly distill complex thought into the brevity demanded by the digital format is not democracy, it is intellectual castration. We are trading the cathedral of profound philosophical inquiry for the fleeting chatter of the marketplace. The very concept of selfhood becomes entangled in this external validation if our thoughts are shaped by the content we consume, and the content we consume is selected by an algorithm that anticipates our desires. Where is the boundary of the authentic self? The modern individual is often less a distinct, sovereign entity and more a composite of externally projected expectations and data-driven suggestions. This surrender of self-determination, however subtle, is the spiritual toll of the new slavery. We have become exquisitely efficient at performing the roles assigned to us by the machine, but we have lost the map to our own internal territories. The challenge now is to face the ultimate, chilling synthesis of this bondage, the moment when the machine begins to dream for us. We have navigated the treacherous currents of distraction and quantified existence. Now we stand before the ultimate spectacle, the dramatic crescendo where the soul's surrender is made complete. This is the climax of The Raven, the moment of profound, synthesized realization that the fear we sought to escape through connection was, in fact, the essential crucible of our humanity. The deepest, most powerful insight is this: the modern world has engineered a perpetual state of anticipatory fear. We are not afraid of physical danger, but of the fear of missing out, the notorious FOMO, is not a trivial neurosis. It is the existential terror of being disconnected from the vital flow of perceived reality, and thus fading into obscurity. The system operates on this fundamental anxiety, demanding constant vigilance, assuring the soul that if it rests, if it pauses, if it dares to look inward, the grand procession of life will march on without it, leaving it stranded in a desolate, forgotten corner of existence. This orchestrated panic prevents the necessary, often agonizing, work of self. Life is not a stream of effortless consumption. It is a difficult, beautiful struggle, requiring courage to face the inherent absurdity and suffering of existence. But the new slavery offers a sophisticated opiate, the continuous, soothing narrative that everything is manageable, every problem solvable by a quick search, every emotional void fillable by a new notification. This denies us the purifying fire of genuine despair, the necessary darkness that precedes any true intellectual dawn. The synthesis of this entire system is the achievement of perfect predictability. When your every desire is anticipated, when your every search query guides the next advertisement, when your political leanings are reinforced until they become dogma, you cease to be a free agent operating under the glorious, terrible weight of contingency. You become a function. The true victory of the unseen masters is not merely control, but the cultivation of a voluntary, pleasurable submission. We choose the chains because they are gilded, comfortable, and promise immediate, though counterfeit, warmth. Remember the words of the spectral bird, nevermore. The terrifying power of that utterance lay not just in the finality of loss, but in the realization that the loss was irreversible, the contemplation eternal. The modern correlative is the realization that if we do not seize back the reins of our attention, if we do not court silence, embrace solitude, and demand depth, opportunity for genuine self-mastery will be forever receding. The soul's journey requires resistance. It demands the rejection of the easy answer, the quick fix, the endless distraction. We must cultivate an interior life so rich, so terrifyingly complex, that the external world becomes merely an interesting, secondary diversion, rather than the primary stage of our existence. The clamor of the digital world can only drown out the quiet voice of the soul, if the soul permits itself to become equally superficial. The ultimate confrontation is not with the machine, but with the self that willingly handed over the keys to its own sanctuary. This confrontation is what awaits us in the final reckoning. We emerge, shivering slightly, from the deep shadows of the preceding analysis, tasked now with gathering the fragmented pieces of the soul and deciding upon the nature of its The conclusion is not a comforting promise of immediate liberation. For freedom, like true introspection, is a discipline fraught with difficulty and the risk of profound loneliness. The final message is simple, though its execution is mountainous. Reclaim the sanctity of boredom. The system fears nothing more than the individual who is content in their own unmediated company, the mind that demands its own pace, the heart that finds sustenance in the absence of external noise. Boredom, that much maligned state, is the fertile void from which true creativity and authentic self-knowledge spring. It is the necessary friction that forces the mind inward, demanding it construct meaning from the raw materials of its own experience, rather than merely consuming prefabricated substitutes. The resistance to the new slavery is thus an internal, solitary campaign. It begins with the radical act of closing the door not just to the outside world, but to the insistent, trivial whispers carried by the devices we carry. It demands a deliberate, even painful, restriction of informational intake, an embrace of a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Learn again to read deeply, not to skim, to converse with presence, not with distraction, to observe the rain falling, not merely to document its occurrence. The goal is not to abolish the tools of modernity, but to subordinate them to the sovereign will. They must become servants, not masters. The individual must assume the role of the meticulous architect of their own attention, guarding it as a miser guards his gold, for it is the only true currency of a meaningful life. We have spent this time together charting the abyss, examining the mechanisms of the spirit et confinement. If this descent into the macabre psychology of modern life has awakened a stirring within your own breast, a restless, profound urge to cast off these invisible fetters and inhabit your life with intention, then the time for passive observation is ended. Do not merely leave this chamber of reflection. Act upon the terrifying knowledge you now possess. Share this discourse with those souls you deem worthy of the agonizing freedom it proposes. Engage in the comments below, not with superficial agreement, but with the necessary difficulty of genuine, considered thought. Let us, together, initiate a profound, intellectual counter-movement, a silent revolution against the empire of the superficial. Remember this: the greatest tragedy is not death, but the death of the consciousness that precedes it. You have been granted the awareness of the cage. The iron law of the universe is that knowledge imposes responsibility. To see the chains and yet choose to wear them is the highest form of self. The light of the screen is fading now, yielding to the essential darkness where all true contemplation dwells. Go forth and build your own fortress of selfhood. Do not mistake the noise of the world for the music of your destiny. The most terrifying revelation is that the door of the new prison was never locked. You merely forgot the path back to the glorious, terrifying freedom of being utterly, profoundly alone.